Hello there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We're Erin from Ever Learning, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Hayley from Taking a Kinder Path. We're gathering for conversations about family life and home education, particularly unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed learning, or as I like to call it, natural learning. We'll be sharing our experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So today we are Hayley and we're Ashley, and then it's so great to have Kiki of Kiki and the Wildlings here again today. I think, Kiki, we spoke, it would have been several months ago, and we were talking about, I can't remember the exact title of the episode, but it was the idea of home educating through just more difficult times, that's kind of through more challenging times. So it's nice to have you back again today. And we are talking about socialization, which feels like a big word to me in the homeschooling world, in the home ed world. And I think it's a word that people get tired of hearing probably. But I also think it's a word that kind of binds people together, because it doesn't really matter what philosophy you're coming from, like what framework you kind of see yourself as kind of within as far as home education. I think it's a common one, that the idea that if kids aren't in school, how are they going to be, I guess, quote, socialized? And I know we've all kind of thought a little bit about what does that even mean? And so for me, I find sometimes people are asking about friendships, like how will kids have a social life? And sometimes people are maybe asking about some of those milestones, like sports teams or the prom, or kind of those more monumental moments that we kind of consider important in society. And then other times I think, like I know when my guy was just getting started, my eldest, I had more than a couple of people ask about things like standing in line and taking turns, and just those kind of basic social skills that people think of. So anyway, I guess we can talk about that today. And I think we'll probably even dig a little deeper, because I think a lot of that is all pretty nuanced, and there are lots of pieces that people aren't even thinking about, I think, when they talk about whether a child is socialized or not if they go to school. Now, I just found, I just looked it up again, because I had remembered a few weeks ago, Missy Willis of Let 'Em Go Barefoot, she had put something on Instagram, and she says, what do you think people mean when they ask if homeschooled kids will be socialized? Then she says, for me, as a former teacher turned unschooling mom, socialization is the ability to recognize and honor the unspoken social conventions and norms of a society. And then she goes on to give some examples. And I mean, one of those is the standard kind of waiting your turn in line. But there are other things there too, around being considerate and aware, impulse control, just participating, like she says, participating in good faith trade for services and goods. And then she says, with this in mind, do you think the best place to learn socially acceptable behaviors is with the same age peers for 6 or more hours a day, 5 days a week, for 280 days a year in a school setting? And she has, she elaborates beyond that, but I thought that was kind of an interesting, starting point. And I believe that I'm just going to see if I can find something here. Sorry, I had it and then I lost it. I might have to come back to it. But she had been doing something in partnership with Anne, and I'm really mixed up here. Anne from Inner Parent Coaching. So it'll take me a minute to find that, I think, but I will try to pop it back into the conversation. So yeah, but it's always interesting to me when I see people asking that question, because I'm like, what does it even mean? And as my kids have gotten older, I've started to see like subtleties beyond what people are even probably thinking about, just as far as their ability to really kind of understand other people and even proactively, kind of expectantly set things in place. So one example that I know I've given is, getting together with grandparents and predicting ahead of time what somebody might enjoy. And really kind of being able to see things through their eyes as well. So yeah, I find that the older my kids have gotten, the more nuances I've noticed. So I'm just interested in what comes to any of your minds when you think of socialization or social skills, or the idea of children interacting in the world without school as the framework.
Well, it is funny. I was thinking about this earlier, about how when people ask you about socialization, it's almost like they're asking you about a topic, like it's a subject that we've somehow got to teach. And I mean, I guess I'll lay my cards on the table and you won't be surprised. I don't think about socialization as a thing that we need to teach. I think of it very much like any learning, that it happens naturally as a consequence of our lives, and that when we're learning about socializing and how to, we have on the national curriculum in UK schools, we have PSHE, which I think is personal, social, health and economic education. And I think when my kids were at school, it was PHSE, which was personal, health, social and emotional education. So, the whole thing about building relationships and emotional awareness, that is part of the school curriculum. And I'm not saying at all that that's a bad thing. I think it's great. I think the more we learn about emotional literacy and building relationships and stuff, that's good. But it did make me think about, when we think about learning to read, and there's some points of view of the fact that the more we formalize learning to read, the more we've segmented it up into specific tasks that you do in a certain order, the more pressure we put on kids to learn to read younger and younger. At the same time, we've kind of got this rise of reading difficulties. And I'm not saying those two things are necessarily connected or a cause and effect or anything like that, but it kind of makes you think. And I know that there is a point of view that if we taught walking and speaking like we teach reading, then we'd have an epidemic of walking and speaking difficulties, which is just an interesting thing to think about, really, that that kind of just made me think, actually, it is a topic. Whereas I guess for me, when I'm thinking about how I want my kids to be socialized, that I want them to be compassionate people, that I want them to care about other people, that I want them to be able to build relationships, take other people's perspectives, be kind, be enthusiastic, be trustworthy, reliable, all those kinds of things. I guess the best way I can think of for them to learn that is by experiencing that and having somebody in their lives that is trustworthy and caring, and I guess that's how I'm hoping. And I've got adults, and that I can see by looking at my adults that that definitely they are compassionate and caring and kind. They're not perfect by any means, but I feel really proud and they're just they're definitely not people who aren't able to function in society, if that makes sense. They have jobs and they have volunteering things that they do. They run coach football teams, and they go climbing, and they go out with their friends, and they do all sorts of things. So I'm rambling on, sorry.
No, I love that. And it's actually really fun, Haley, because I finally found the quote I was looking for from Inner Parent Coaching, and it's Ann Hansen, and that name is escaping me. And before I read it, I just wanted to say it reminds me of so in our schools there's a lot of anti-bullying assemblies and a lot of those sorts of trainings. And in fact, I can't remember whether I was sharing it here or whether it was like a private online conversation about how one of our local libraries, I remember a couple of years ago, going in and they would change their front display, depending on the month, right? So for May, you would have all kinds of different, flowers and books about gardening. These were kind of like the family or the family or children or youth oriented displays. And then summer might have, I don't know, summer themed books and on and on. And there had been this beautiful display in August, like this gorgeous summer display. And, and I went in the first week of what our school year is, which is just really early in September. And the whole display was bullying. And I thought, wow, they had all these different themes for each month. And for September, that's what came to mind, is an entire display on bullying. I mean, some of it was maybe helping your child adapt or whatever, but it was all based around the idea that there was going to be some difficulty because like it was September. And so when you mentioned that about the idea of sort of like teaching social skills versus allowing them to happen naturally, it makes me think a bit about this tendency to have all these books and publications about bullying and these assemblies. And I think there's actually, you probably know better than I would at the elementary level, but there's a lot built into the curriculum as well, I believe. And it's not that kids might not be learning from those, but it's just not the same as having those everyday experiences. And I think what you were alluding to, Haley, without putting words in your mouth, but that idea of having that secure attachment with key people and family people. So it doesn't matter how many facts you give somebody about social skills or bullying or any of those things, if you're not feeling like your cup is full, and if a child is not feeling, safely and securely attached to family, they just aren't going to have the emotional resources to behave differently, right? Or it's not something you kind of learn intellectually. Anyway, back to this quote I was looking for, and then I'll stop. So Ann Hansen says, one of the biggest mistakes we are making in our society is placing the importance of education and early socialization, in quotes, over a child's secure attachment to a parent or caregiver. From a young age, most children spend more time with peers than loving, caring adults. We need to talk about attachment. And I thought that just really clearly illustrates a lot of what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's really great and really important. And when I was thinking about what we were going to be talking about today, that's kind of what came to mind. And even more so when you were both just sharing there. And I wrote a couple notes because you guys know I'm writing notes as you guys share, always learning. I wrote down like self-compassion, self-care, and where do our kids get those feelings from? Where does that come from? So I think about how it comes down to their attachment to us in the home and our relationship with them. And then that extends to extended family members and then even close friends and those relationships over time that they build, and their confidence grows through having those strong, healthy relationships. And I want to emphasize that I think it can take, and it's different for everyone, but years. Like it's a process. Like as they grow, they're developing their self-awareness and there's all that self stuff, right? But I think that's happens very much through those strong connections and relationships they have. And then they're able to go out feeling, like you said, Erin, their cup is more filled up. And like you said, Haley, the idea and the goal is not that they become perfect and they go out and they always make all the right choices when they're socializing with others, but that, overall they're feeling good, they're feeling safe. I really like how you use that word, but it all comes down, I think anyway, to that attachment that we start. Like that's the foundation, but it really takes years and then even ongoing, those strong connections that we maintain with them, hopefully throughout the years. It's not like they get to a certain age and they need less connection, which actually reminded me of, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I don't want to forget to mention this. I haven't read this book in a while, so I can't remember every bit of it, but it's reminding me of the book called Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers by Gordon Neufeld and Gaber Mate. I remember reading that, and that was kind of, because I always got that messaging that from different sources and different people and different conversations over the years, like the importance of kids being with kids and the importance of kids having friends. And I don't disagree with that at all. There's a lot of value in those friendships and developing the friendships, and they learn through those. But when I read that book, it just was another one of those pieces where I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me, that yes, while friendships and peers are important, our children's connection. And I can even reflect back to my younger self and thinking about my relationship with my parents versus the relationships I had with my friends and how that shifted throughout the year. And one thing it made me think of is like my parents were the constant, right? Like they were there all along, whereas friendships, even long ones, like mostly come and go. So I just wanted to mention that book because, yeah, I'm thinking about today, I was really thinking about whether your children stay at home and homeschool or whether they go to school. It's another one of those things where I think we all, we worry about how they are when they're with others or away from us or in their friendships and whatnot. So again, whether they're in school or not, and I think many parents would probably feel that their children's connection to them offers so much in that. Yeah, I had some other thoughts. I really liked what you shared, Haley, about just like learning to behave around others, like in school and stuff too. So I won't get into that too much, but I think that's interesting as well. So, but I don't want to jump all over the place.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, in terms of socialization, it's one of those things again that everyone assumes school has got it right, and oh my goodness, how are you possibly going to compare to that? And obviously, like any other subject, it's for me, the beauty of home education is self-pacing and to experience through meaningful kind of connections with whatever it is. So whether it's sharing, they could go to school and have a day about sharing, whereas naturally when you're with your kids every day, it might just come up and it's relevant to what's happening. But I think it's those high expectations, as always, that our kids at the age of 4 have to suddenly come and conform to whatever those expectations are of socialization. And actually, our individual kids, some of them are amazing at, reading the room and understanding other people's emotions at a very young age. My youngest, from the age of 3, could kind of really empathize, which is unbelievable. My 8-year-old only just really understanding that. And I think it's that. So what I always find it, when we say socialization, it's kind of how we can get along in the world. But unfortunately, and I know this is a bit controversial to some people, but for me, at school, it's a synthetic world. It's not the real world. And so when we say, that how we can try and, I don't know what I'm saying now, but I think it's just that we're out in the real world. And that's where you learn all real world skills, isn't it? And socialization is one of those, whatever it is, whether we're talking about emotional kind of connections or social connections in terms of how we get along in the world. But I think it's just, I just wanted to kind of make that, I guess, that point that I just think there's such high expectations, and I like the fact that we can just let our children naturally develop things and also play to their own unique being, because some of us are grown adults. Like, come on, we all know people who are just terrible at being, they just see it from their own point of view, or they are what's anti-establishment because they hate what in our country hate the Tories or what, and they can be quite kind of blinded by bigger picture stuff because of their big views on something. I don't know. So I just think none of us are perfect, are we? And we're all going to have weaknesses and strengths. And I love the fact that we can kind of nurture those and respect those by home educating, I suppose. So I see it as a real positive. To me, it's not at all like a concern. I feel like our kids are getting so much of real world thinking and emotions that it just doesn't even, it doesn't worry me anyway, I suppose.
I think it's interesting what you say, Kiki, thinking about socialization in schools, and obviously schools have a job to do, and schools are very different. There are wonderful teachers and wonderful schools, but in terms of, it is interesting to think about the kind of things that are valued in school children, and whether or not, if we were setting up the ideal society, or we were all living in a way that we'd all really, really like to live, would those qualities that are valued in school, I guess I'm thinking about things like there's a lot of conformity in schools. There tends to be a lot of rewards, punishment, kind of manipulation as a bit of a model for, social relationships and interaction. There's a lot of segregation in schools, I think, depending on the school, obviously. But when we think about the kinds of qualities that we want in adults, when we think about things like, I guess, school, there's a lot of focus. I know we've talked about this before. There is a lot of focus on what is the right answer. Whereas when we're thinking about the kinds of adults that we want, I guess we want adults who can cooperate and adults who can be creative and take initiative and, come up with lots of different ideas rather than being fixated on one right answer. And I guess problem solving and I know we've mentioned this before on the podcast, the thing about how making mistakes can feel really it can be hard in school to make mistakes. You feel like you don't want to make mistakes, whereas in actual fact, as we know, making mistakes is a really important part of the learning process and about coming up with creative solutions to things and moving forward and innovation and all those kinds of things. So it is kind of weird when you think about it like that. I guess school is great for socialization into school and environments that might be quite similar to that. And I guess, we all know the connections with the Industrial Revolution and kind of, a lot of those, you mentioned queuing, Erin, that kind of being able to adhere to a timetable, those kinds of things are really useful in some settings, but not so great in others. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
I think just quickly, just one other thing I would, I guess is a big one, is for socialization to be able to get by in society, is consent is a big one, isn't it? And I think that's one I really struggle with, in the sense that, we talk about consent all the time. It's a huge, huge problem in today's society. And yet, unfortunately, in school, consent is very, very limited, isn't it? And I find that is something that I find very difficult to come to terms with, that at such young ages, our children can't even consent to use their own bodies at certain times of the day. They need to go to the toilet, or they need a drink, or they don't want to learn that today, or they just feel a bit rubbish and they don't want to speak in a really polite way that day, that they forgot their manners because they're having a hard time, whatever it is. So I think that is a big, big issue to me, that it is such a worldwide problem, and yet it is instilled, and it is a massive part of socialization in schools, isn't it? So I just wanted to jump in on that one, because I think,
Yeah, and if I can follow that, because it's making me think about how there's this high expectation and pressure as well. I was talking to my guys about this just before. And obviously not all teachers and all classrooms and all schools would do this, or it wouldn't look like this way across the board. But this pressure that I think a lot of kids feel, and the message that they receive in school, is that you have to be friends with everyone. And I don't know if, maybe I worked in elementary school, so like kindergarten to grade 8. So I don't know how that would change come high school. I'm sure it probably changes quite a bit as they're older, but with little ones, if it's a birthday party, it's very common here anyway, where parents tell their child, you invite your whole class, so nobody's left out. And I'm not saying that that's wrong to do, but there just seems to be this expectation that you must get along with everyone, which just seems like a high expectation, an unrealistic expectation. And this idea, I guess, that I think some people, and they probably don't even think about it too much, but this idea that everyone in your grade 4 class or grade 1 class is your friend. And I was having a conversation with my guys who are 9 and 7 about this earlier, and I was asking them, if you were in school and if you had a class of, say, 29 other kids, would they all be your friends? And at first they said, yeah. And then we got into talking about it, and they were like, well, we got into, what is a friend? Who are our friends? How many friends do people really have? And ideas of how, some people are really happy with one or two really good friends. Some people like to go visit different groups of friends at different times. Some people are friends with the kids, some of the kids in their class, maybe they have a few good friends, and then they have some hockey buddies. So it was really interesting to get into those conversations with them, because I do, just from being in the school and hearing other parents talk, I guess, is that there's this idea that when you send your child to school, they have a whole class of friends. And this high expectation that you have to, I think it's fair to have the expectation to be overly, to be kind to all your classmates, but who are your actual friends? So just those like messages that young children receive, I think, and maybe that happens in other areas other than school too, but I know that's definitely something I saw when I was in the schools teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the case, isn't it, that just because, I mean, what school does give you is a large pool of people to pick from. And, if you're lucky, you find people that you gel with, but not everybody does. And I think that whole idea of you're never lonelier than when you're in a crowd can definitely be some people's experience of school. Not everybody's, obviously, but that is something that can definitely happen, can't it? If you don't feel like you fit in and you don't find that special friend. And there is a lot of emphasis on best friends in school, isn't it? Who is your best friend and who are you going to sit next to and who's going to be your partner in PE? And those things matter to kids. Nobody wants to be the last person to be picked, or I remember that experience myself. It's not nice, is it? And so just because there are a lot of people there, it's definitely the case, isn't it, that you're not necessarily going to find somebody that you feel that you really gel with.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley, that idea of the whole class being invited is it just makes me think how schools, and then often parents within schools, are doing the best they can with a big, difficult situation, right? So it is really hard to figure out how to do that, how to navigate that socially. So it makes sense to me that seems like the kind thing to do, but it doesn't help kids learn what they would really like for their birthday, or what, it's kind of a catch-22. It's maybe back to that consent point you made, Kiki. It's just very much, well, this is what we do for birthdays. And so if that's kind of the bar that you're looking for, then that's okay. But it doesn't really help us figure out for ourselves over time what's important to us and what are our needs. And yeah, so I understand why it happens, but I think it's another example of trying to do the best you can within like a larger system. Something else that I had been thinking about is the idea of how many friends do kids need, and do kids need friends? And I think that's definitely something that it's something that we hear. It's important for kids to have friends, and we kind of have certain ages, I think, in mind. Kiki, maybe similar to what you said, around 4 or 5, there start to be some kind of expectation that you be out in the bigger world and you start to develop social skills. And I don't know what it's like in the UK. I know certainly here, a lot of that starts almost in infancy, the idea of going to baby groups and toddler groups and kind of socializing your toddler or preschooler. But I have noticed it a lot, even in conversations around self-directed education. So sometimes it's like anything when you're reading about homeschooling or unschooling, sometimes you're hearing perspectives that actually kind of push up against each other a little bit. So I think we always have to think about, well, what rings true for me, or what is true for my family. And one of the ones that I can think of, like, I really appreciate the work of Dr. Peter Gray. I think especially around some of the kind of the learning, the way that he describes learning and coming to gain knowledge and skill. I have gained so much from his work. Something I have noticed in a few different interviews he's done is the idea of kind of that age of, I may be misquoting him, so I want to say that up front, but it's kind of that idea that around age 5, it's important for parents to kind of figure out how to find that outlet outside of the family. Similarly, I've read things from other homeschoolers and unschoolers about the importance of really kind of building that tribe or that community of kids. And I think that can be really important. I just don't think it's equally important for everybody. And I think it might not even be equally important for kids in the same family. So I'd just be curious to see what your perspectives are on that, and whether you might have even kind of moved in and out of those thoughts. I just actually, before I stop, I'll just say that I think early on it was very important to me because, a couple of my kids were very extroverted. So it felt like we needed to try to find those connections. And I also think that we began homeschooling at a time that it was actually a lot more common than I realized, but it wasn't common to the people I knew. So the idea that we were doing this, it helped a lot for those people to know that we had other people that we were doing it alongside. So it made it easier, I think, within, friend conversations and extended family conversations, for them to know that we did have this kind of outlet, this social community, so to speak, where we would have Valentine's Day parties and we would have hikes together and co-ops and those kinds of things. And, I was very involved with facilitating and co-facilitating that community for a long time, and I don't have any regrets at all. But I do realize, kind of as I started observing my younger two more closely, especially my youngest, that I'm not sure for every personality that is as necessary as I thought it was, or as I was hearing it was. So I think we're all colored by our own particular situation.
Yeah, I can share. I've gone in and out of it, as you said, Erin, and I've heard those messages too. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Peter Gray's work. But I have heard him make, commenting on what you shared, Erin, about young children who, I think he's even said, unschooling children, really, that it's really important for parents to find those outside of the family connections for them and to be with other kids and whatnot, and other adults, I think he's even said. And I think that's probably true for some kids, maybe a lot of kids, maybe most kids, or maybe for kids at certain points in their childhood. I can just quickly share that I noticed my eldest really seemed to want to have other kids to play with pretty regularly, like would have made the choice to go out, and probably still would make the choice, I think. So this would have been like over a year and a half ago now, where I was like, okay, I need to go out more and meet up with other homeschool families. So I really committed to that, and it wasn't the easiest thing to do for, just getting together with people you don't really know yet and all of that stuff. But we did that, and we started to go out. I mean, really long story short, we made some friends, we had some positive experiences, but overall we've stopped. I realized, I'm like, this isn't it. This isn't what we were looking for. This isn't filling all of our cups. And I was kind of like, did I do it wrong? Why is this not working for us? This is what homeschool families do. And I think there was some of that pressure to, oh, look, we meet up with other homeschool kids, right? There's that pressure to like, let other people know that it's okay. And again, we had some positive experiences and we met some really nice people, but we stopped doing it pretty much completely. And we started really looking outside of the box as to, okay, there are some needs here for my eldest, who's more extroverted, to connect with other people of various ages. It did actually, I would say, sometimes he enjoys it more with kids a little bit younger than him and definitely older. He was really one to like the mixed age thing really works nicely for him. And my youngest, who's 7, so it was like 5, 6 at the time, he stopped coming out with us. We would plan it on a day that dad was home, and I would take my eldest, who still wanted to go to these like homeschool meetups at a park or whatever, and he would still want to go. My youngest would just stay home with dad. So that was a real sign to me that I'm like, okay, this really isn't working for you. And we found other ways, which I can share, but I don't want to take up all the time. My point was just that I think what you're saying, Erin, it's really true that every family needs to find out what those needs are individually, and then how to have those needs met kind of collectively in a way, and how it can change over time, and that there's not one way to do it. There are different ways, and I can get into that later as to how we've done that, because there was a period of where I was like, I don't know how else to do it other than to like go follow the other homeschool families in our area that are getting together at this one particular park. But there are other ways. So that's been helpful to know.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as well. And I think, you hear a lot of the podcasts I was listening to, it's like, if there's not much going on in your area, start your own. I did that, and because I felt, I had to try and meet other, like-minded people and mixed age kids. So I did start something like a nature kind of adventure group. And it was, I guess, when it comes to socialization, friendships, it's also factoring us as the mothers, because I definitely hit a point, I think. I mean, I really struggled with my pregnancy last year, but then this year, I've just felt like I get so overwhelmed by all the different, I guess I've started talking to some of my friends who do school, so not home educators. And one of the things that really came through was they said to me, God, the emotional baggage you have with some of these other families is intense. And I think it's, if your kids go to school, like one of my friends, she's like, I don't even know any of the names of like the kids' parents. I don't want to know. I'm not interested. I'm not on the WhatsApp groups. And he can be friends with them at school. If he's got one best friend, he can come and play. But I just haven't got the space for. Whereas one of the things I have struggled with, no doubt, is you end up doing this group, and then there's all the different mums and the dynamics with that, and they're different. It's not even necessarily their beliefs or their ways, but just the exhaustion that can come. I was just coming away feeling really drained from it. And then likewise, now I was looking at my kids, like, what are they getting out of this? And how are they responding to the group? And how, when we come away, how do they feel? And it just didn't necessarily feel very positive. And I think I kind of got into this rhythm of trying to build a community. I was so kind of desperate for that, for me and for them. And actually now, like, realizing that we're just not there now. Like, we don't really, it was just too much, and it wasn't really that positive. And I think also on the flip side of that, you can really get on well with other mums, and you really want to meet them because you love, like, chatting with somebody who actually really gets it. But actually the kids don't really gel, or they have nothing in common. And so then you're kind of not really doing it for the right reasons so now I might meet those mums just for coffee separately, and not, if we can ever get, away from the kids. But I know, like, it's hard sometimes to go out. Like, both my boys want to see other kids, but they don't need to see them every day. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? But I think you can go out, and it is hard sometimes because, I'm exhausted, and I have to go and kind of make small talk with all these other mums. And also, I think one of the things I have found definitely challenging, I've got a very boisterous older child, who is, like, awesome. I'm like always in awe of him, his kind of enthusiasm for life and zest for life. And he's like a magnet to other kids. But I think some of the other mums find him a lot. And that has been really hard for me. And I found it really, really upsetting at times, the way maybe he's been spoken to. And then I'm thinking, hold on a minute. The whole point of this life is that I want them to be them. And I don't want them to be kind of made to feel that they're, extrovert. I don't know, their outward thinking, or the way they might respond to things is wrong. And I think that, again, it's that intensity sometimes, that every little like scuffle or children having a bicker like that, I found like sometimes the mums parachute in and have to get involved with that. And that is a challenge for me, because I don't believe that. I kind of feel like we need to kind of let them learn as they go, and that kind of unstructured time that's not adult led. So it's hard to then find those people that get that and want the same. So I think that it's not been easy in that sense, definitely, I think.
Kiki, I love that so much. I can relate to that, and I can actually kind of see it. I've kind of been on both ends of it, where you it's so hard, right? Because you have a group of parents, especially when you're first trying to get to know each other, and you don't know the dynamics among each other or the kids, and that feeling of, kind of people jumping in and maybe trying to direct things. And the flip of that is that I've been with groups of people that you can see things unfolding and they're just still sitting there chatting, and you're like, oh my, okay. And so it is a lot to think about, right? And sometimes it doesn't even involve just my child, but you can see stuff happening maybe between another couple of kids. And I guess the benefit of school is there's a clarity of who's in charge. And with a group of parents and adults, you're kind of trying to navigate all that, which, I mean, that's kind of skill building on its own, isn't it? Just try to figure out how to sort of do those pieces. And I think ultimately it's good learning for kids, but I think you used the word exhausting, or maybe I was just, maybe that's my own thought, but it can be really tiring. And I think that, I don't know, I think it's been helpful in the past for me to differentiate like what my goal was with an interaction. So if there was something that was just a really good thing for my kids, like they were really growing from it and really wanting to connect with a group of kids, then I would sort of, like you're saying, you might not always get along with those particular parents. Not get along, that's not the right word. It's just, it might take some effort to kind of connect and make those things flow. And so I think if it felt like it was something that was really important to my kids, I could do that. Like I would sort of say, you know what, I'm not really going here to just form a best friendship. I'm going here because this is meeting the needs of a particular child. But the flip of that is sometimes you can kind of get into things for the sake of them. And so it is a catch-22. I mean, it would be lovely if the exact parents that you connected with also had the kids that connected. The other thing that I would find is there might be a sibling that would connect with another family sibling, but then the other sibling wouldn't really want to go there with the other sibling. And so it's just a lot to sort through, right? So I think just kind of being clear sometimes about like, what are my goals here? When I say my goals, I mean in respecting what my children want and need, but not just kind of socializing just for the sake of socializing. And I think early on, maybe that's what I was doing. I thought, I need to hang in. I need to kind of find this group of people. And sometimes it can just become, being out for the sake of being out.
I think you said so many interesting things, and I relate to so much of what both of you have said. I mean, I feel very fortunate at the moment because we have a lovely home ed community where I am at the moment, and we've been home edding for 14 years, I think 13, 14 years, and I've seen such a change in terms of, I mean, one thing I think is that the home ed community seemed to be quite mobile. So we've had a lot of people who've emigrated, gone traveling, moved away. Then there've been kids who've gone back to school, and there've been kids, and people like happens at school. People, you get your best friend at school and then they move away, and then you have to renegotiate things. And there were a couple of things that stood out to me from the things that you were saying. And one was that, people say that home ed kids, won't be able to learn social skills because, some people think they put a lot of emphasis on that home word. that, and obviously we do sometimes spend a lot of time at home, but a lot of the time we're out in the world, and the things that you guys have just been saying shows that we do actually bump up against a lot of different people. And my experience of home ed groups is very much that there's a diverse group of characters, ages, experiences, temperaments. They are definitely getting experiences. Obviously not all of them are positive, but not all of them are going to be negative either. So there's a lot of learning that comes from that, definitely. And the other thing I was thinking was about this, as you rightly said, Kiki, really early on, about how it depends on the needs of our individual children. And I think connection and relationships are so important, but I think it's the quality of those relationships that matter much more than the quantity. And for some kids, the quantity will be important, and they want lots and lots of socializing with lots of different people. But then you'll have other kids who really don't want that. And I know, we've got 4 children. So over the years, negotiating that, somebody wanting to go to a particular home ed group and other people not wanting to, and somebody really getting on with one child in the family and the others really not. And and sometimes you gel with the kids, sometimes you gel with the parents, and sometimes you have brilliant kind of synchronicity where your kids get on and you get on with the parents and everything is wonderful. And we've been really lucky to have that happen. What was I saying about the quality of relationships and about seeing what works for your children? And my experience is I guess the beauty of unschooling is that thing that we focus on the relationships and we focus on what matters. We have that communication with our children. And I know as my eldest 2 got older and when it got into teenage years and things changed, people moved away, some of their friends went back to school. For one of them, we did get to a point where she felt that she needed more social contact than she was having. And when that happened, we were able to talk about that. And it wasn't all nice talking. Some of it was her being very upset and sad, and there were a lot of feelings to work through, but we were able to take steps to kind of remedy that when it happened. And she actually took a lot of initiative. She found a group that she wanted to join, and then we did, I phoned them up, saw whether or not she could join. She found a part-time job. There were things that happened, which makes me think about, I guess, how as adults we make friends. And we make friends through natural experiences of life, don't we? Like joining, I don't know, if you're into singing and you join a choir, or you're into a particular sport and you join a football team, or you get a job and you find friends through that. And not everybody's going to be your cup of tea, but there are so many different ways that we find friendships and a social life, aren't there?
Yeah, and also age. I was just going to say that my boys love hanging out with some of our neighbours who are one of them's 97. One of them, I don't know how old she is, I won't say, but she's in her 40s, I think. And they just love hanging out, but it's almost like that, you can only be socialized with kids of the same age, and that isn't the case at all. They get so much from those kind of moments of we invite our neighbours for a cup of tea and our poetry tea time, and we chat, and it's they will often ask, can we ask one of our neighbours to come to that? And we actually do that at the end. We could ask them after school, we have done in the past, but they love the adults coming to experience that with us and to share their baking and the conversations. So I think that's another thing as well, isn't it? That we don't always, like in the workplace, I've got friends of all different ages, and it's no different to kids, but kids mostly, they don't get those opportunities. It's not even an option.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think I spoke about this before, but in terms of children, my friend used to run a nursery. And in the UK years ago, the nurseries used to be run along family, kind of a family style. So a nursery worker would have allocated a little group of children, and maybe they'd have one baby, and then they'd have a 1-year-old and a couple of 2-year-olds, and they'd basically have a span of different ages in their little group that they were responsible for. And more recently, nurseries in the UK are much more, they have a baby room, and then there's, each worker is responsible for a specific age group. And obviously that's a lot to do, that's how it works in schools. Apart from sometimes we live in a very rural area, so we have a lot of very small schools around here where there might be, I can't think how many years there are in primary school, but say there are 6 different year groups, and there might only be one class. So in that case, they're going to be different ages together. But I remember my friend reflecting on how sad she was when the family kind of culture went out of nurseries, because she felt that worked so well, that the children got experiences of being helpful and being helped, and they kind of had they were able to be the role model, and they were able to look up to the older kids that were their role models. And it is an interesting thing in schools where everybody obviously is developing at a different rate, but it is kind of funny that you put all the kids at the same age together that may actually be dealing with a lot of the same emotional communication issues, which, whereas if they perhaps had a wider age span, then they can learn from each other, and they can get the experience of being more of a leader and helping other kids to problem solve, those kinds of things. But that's not how it works in schools, is it? We don't, we split people up into their age groups and hope that they're going to get on.
Well, so there's something there, Haley, and then before I forget, Kiki, you had mentioned, I think you said your neighbor's 97. Did I get that right? Yeah. And it's interesting. I had kind of put this question out to the online community that I'm part of, the Unschooling Together, and just recently. So I didn't get much time to get feedback, but a couple people gave feedback, and one of the people said, when they think of socialization, what they think of is those social norms within a particular culture, but even your family within the culture. So, kind of supporting kids in navigating things like weddings and funerals and births of babies. And, I can't remember the exact examples, but like a new family moving into the neighborhood could be an example. So what are those social norms in our society? And it's not about kids behaving perfectly while they're at a funeral or a wedding, but just having the time to be part of those things and to talk a little bit about them beforehand and maybe debrief, afterward. I think back to that idea of time that I often talk about, just kind of having that span of time that when we come into these sort of typical cultural events, we have a bit of time to, lead up to them, wind down from them, really be present at them. And so I thought that was an interesting way to think about socialization as well. And it just, that can be such a range of ages. And it's probably important that it is in our normal communities. And then I was just thinking to that idea, like, Haley, that's interesting to me that it doesn't sound like that long ago then, that there was some nurseries set up in those more natural kind of like multi-age. I mean, I know they were all young kids, but still to have a range of ages like that. And I think about how when something becomes a law or something becomes common, everybody assumes it's necessary. So like in our province, so for example, even myself, when I went to kindergarten, I didn't go until I was 5. We only had kindergarten. We didn't have 2 years of kindergarten. We just had 1. And I just went in the afternoons. So for me, when I was 5, I was there from about, I don't know, maybe like 12:45 to 3:15 or something like that. It wasn't a huge day. By the time my son was born, not only was kindergarten, not by the time he was born, but by the time he was around that age, not only was it all day, but there was a whole other year below it, junior kindergarten, which started at like some kids were 3 or 4, and that was full day as well. And I can remember people saying, they were talking about another family who had chosen not to do this junior kindergarten year. And they said, well, I consider that for my child, but I really don't want them to be behind in that sort of school routine and social piece. And I can remember saying to them, but your older child wouldn't have gone to junior kindergarten because it wasn't in that area yet. And they're like, well, I know, but, and it was just like, it's the idea that they have to keep up with what's happening in the current law or the current kind of social norm. And I often think about the fact that, like, for my mom, she wouldn't have gone to school until grade 1. There was no kindergarten at all. And she was born at the beginning of the year. So she would have been 6.5 by the time she attended school, which is about 2.5 years older than a lot of people in our province now. And I also think it was at a time where there weren't all these different groups. She wouldn't have gone to a parent and taught group or any of those. She would have just been home with her mom and her grandma and her aunts. And then when she was 6.5, she would have gone to school. And I'm sure I don't know. I can't really compare those two experiences, except to say she was certainly able to become socialized. So it's just funny how when laws change and social norms change, we begin to assume that that's necessary, even though only a generation earlier, it wasn't even a possibility.
Well, it's the same with dogs. We have to socialize. There's socialization parties and classes for dogs. I mean, like, it's just, everyone's obsessed. But I just wanted to go back to you saying about time, and Ashley said earlier about kind of finding yourself and understanding yourself. And I'm a real big believer in that. And it's having the time, gifting our children that time to have the downtime where they can really explore their inner minds and work through in their minds, like situations that experiences that might have happened, that day or that week, and to kind of process that and to kind of, play with that in their mind, having that time, because so many kids don't, do they? And then having the time to come and discuss it with us, or for us to be so connected that we know that they clearly need to talk about something, or we know we picked up on something early on in that day that we can kind of come back to and really kind of discuss our kind of, their feelings around that and the emotions and things, and how to then replay those experiences and work out how they can, next time maybe do things differently, or they could have said things in a different way, or somebody else might have been having a bad day, whatever it is, that is a big part of it as well, isn't it? And it's that, again, I think, I can't remember, I'm sorry if it's Erin or Hayley who said it, is that, I think it was you, Hayley, kids are putting at the same age, and when they developmentally don't know, like, they're expected to learn from each other, and they simply don't have that developmentally, they don't have it yet, let alone kind of experience wise. And it's similar, I think Gabor Mate, I think I was reading something about him where he was saying, I think it might have even been the hold on to your kids. I can't remember, to be honest. I read so much, I never remember where it all comes from. But and saying how our teens, it is the norm, like you say, Erin, now, that teens are kind of rearing each other, and they don't have any wisdom about certain experiences, or, they're so disconnected from those older kind of ages, and it's all, they're kind of learning from each other, but they haven't got enough experience to learn from certain things. So I think it's a similar thing in that sense, and that is, I think there's a big thing at the moment coming out over here about the, boys and sex education, for example, and how young children as young as 10 are seeing pornography, and because they're sharing it with each other on phones or whatever, and their parents aren't even aware of this. So whilst I'm not naive to those things go on, but being able to actually have the connection with our kids, hopefully, maybe this is wishful thinking, but we can then say, okay, you've seen that, and have those conversations around that. And they're not just learning what that means from their friends. I mean, we've recently just got back from holiday, and our kids were off all over the shop with all these other kids, which was wonderful. I couldn't believe how my youngest in particular had all this confidence. He's like, see ya, and we were like, whoa, where are you going? It was a bit, and they were hanging out with older kids, which is great, But then I suddenly thought, God, I was reading this article while on like the sunbed about these kids with pornography. And I was like, they're often 12, 14-year-olds. You know, they could be showing them something. I was like, oh my God, what are we doing here? You know, it's like, I guess, yeah, just being mindful of, I don't know, just the importance of, I think what we've lost in society is that I guess, it's not uncool to hang out with your older uncles or your mum or the older neighbours. You know, we can gain so much from that. And perhaps if that was more embedded in society, how important that is, instead of all this time with just our same age kids, whether it's, you know, before school clubs and then at school and then after school clubs, where is the time for that multi-generational kind of connections, I guess, to learn from that?
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important to think about, because going way back to the beginning, Erin, you were mentioning bullying. And it's actually funny because my youngest, one reason he will give if he's asked why he doesn't want to go to school is because he is convinced he'll have a bully. And that comes from a number of different things, from stories my older son shared about his experience at school, because he did have trouble with one little boy. But also it's very normalized. So it's in the books that they read, it's in the shows that they watch, they hear other kids talk about it. So when he thinks that, and actually the other thing that's normalized is unkind, mean, scary teachers in media. That's a big thing too. So for a little guy who's not gone to school, he'll tell you that those are some of the reasons why he doesn't want to go. But I really think, I wouldn't go as far as saying that bullies wouldn't exist or that bullying wouldn't happen anymore. But in school, if children were given the opportunity to build connections and relationships across ages, I think a couple different things would happen. One, there would just be more opportunity for kids to connect with other like-minded kids, for lack of putting it in a better way, because if you're in a class with, I just say, you know, a class size of say 30, like we already said, you're kind of lucky if you find a really good friend in that group of kids. And if you don't, you really don't have, at least where we live, a lot of opportunity to spend much time with any other kids. I mean, probably about less than 40 minutes a day, I would say, where we live, where you would maybe get to cross paths with someone else and spend some time with. So if there was more, and I hear the teachers really talk about how much they love it and how great it is when every once in a while they'll do I don't know, the last time I was in a school, I remember I was teaching, and the grade 8 class I was with were reading buddies with the kindergarten class. So it was a huge age gap. And the teachers and the educational assistant that were there, they're just going on about all the good, positive things. Like the great, you know, there were a couple of grade 8s in that class that really just struggled and had a hard time at school. And the teachers were talking about how they just shine in these moments when they're with the kindergarten reading buddies. And I remember asking how this is great. And I knew that this was something like reading buddies is, I've had seen that quite a bit before in the schools. So I said, how often do you guys do this? Because I'm thinking it's such a great thing, right? You must be trying. And they said, and I can't remember what time of the year it was, but I was surprised. They said, oh, this is the first time we've been able to fit it in this school year. And I thought, oh, so even though they see the positives of mixing the ages and mixing the grades and bringing the kids together, this system is just not really built to support those things coming together. And I mean, we need a lot more mixing up than just 20 minutes as reading buddies. But I think having, a younger student have a couple older friends, and the older kids having opportunities to get to know the younger kids, I think would really help when it comes to things like bullying, because there would just be more connections and more relationships. And I think the other thing, I'm losing my train of thought. There's one other thing I was thinking about. Oh, I think it was just along the lines of kids having more opportunities to find someone, maybe it's a grade younger or a grade or two older, that they connect with. And I think we all know, when I explained to my younger guy about bullies, because he has a lot of questions about bullies and why people bully, and he just thinks they're horrible children. And we get into questions like, why do you think these kids bully at school? And I get into, they don't feel safe at school. They maybe haven't had the opportunity to make a good friend at school. And we go in, I mean, there's all the different reasons, right? But I think mixing up the ages would just create such a more positive environment. And I think we always point this stuff out. It's not to say it would be perfect and that there would be no issues anymore, but I just think there's a couple really good things that I could clearly see would help in a lot of those ways, in building more of a community. And I see that in the schools. They're always talking about our classroom is a community, our school is a community. So the teachers in there and the adults in there, that's what they want. They want to provide a space for the kids to be in that feels like community. But when you segregate them, even just by age, and they're segregated more than by age, I think I don't want to say it's impossible to do, and there can certainly be different times that it feels like there's community, but I don't know that they can really build more of like an authentic community, which I think would be really great.
I think as humans, we have a need for a purpose, don't we? We need to be needed. That's something that can really, really help us. If we feel like nobody needs us and we've got no purpose in life, then that is not a good place to be, is it? And I think we had a really idyllic home ed day yesterday, and they are not all like this at all, but we had a park meet yesterday afternoon where it was at least 10 kids, and they ranged from I think she was 14, the eldest, down to a little one waddling around in a nappy, and they were, the ages were spread out in that range, and they were playing. It was beautiful weather here. They all played together for hours, and they were playing all kinds of team games like capture the flag and, I don't know, cops and robbers and all sorts of things. And then there was also a lot of time where they were just hanging out on the playground equipment, and the bigger ones were helping the little ones were trying to do what the bigger ones were doing. And there was a lot of, even quite small kids helping the smaller kids. And that is, I think that's really lovely for building your character, isn't it? To feel like you have been able to help somebody else is a really powerful feeling, isn't it? And those meets are not like we've alluded to already. Those meets don't always happen like that, but sometimes they do, and it's just and it is really lovely when that happens, and it just shows you that kids don't have to get on with kids that are the same age, and there is so much they get from being with other people of different ages, definitely. And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Erin can be found on the web and on Instagram at Everlearning. Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shells. And I, Hayley, can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. We'd love it if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might like it. And if you've enjoyed this episode, maybe you'd consider leaving us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We're so grateful you made time in your day to listen to us chat. Thanks so much for listening.